All right, guys, we have a really fun video for you here. This is on the Fox News channel. So the title of the video is Socialist Congressional Candidate Doubles Down on Call for Homeless People to Break into Empty Homes. So Jesse Waters is going to talk to Rebecca Parson, I believe her name is, and she's running for office. And this is actually a really interesting back and forth. Now, you'll see how he sets up the segment. You know, he's kind of trying to be smug and dismissive and treat her like she's crazy. And then she comes in and she approaches it in good faith, and I think it's a really interesting back and forth. Let's watch.
Campaign ads keep getting more and more creative every year, and this year's no different. Democratic Socialist congressional candidate Rebecca Parson is running in Washington's 6th Congressional District, and she recently made waves with this in-your-face ad. Take a look.
Billionaires tell us you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, that. Imagine I propose a housing for all bill in Congress.
Now, hold on here. Hold on. Let's run that back. I want to reflect on that line for a second, because this is something people on the right have screamed and cried and bitched and moaned about. There is that famous, I forget who it was. It was somebody from, what's the name of that group? That creepy-ass group of billionaires that meets together wearing suits and talks about how they're going to save the world and shit. World Economic Forum, is it? Anyway, one of the billionaires from there had this line, "You're going to own nothing and you're going to like it." She's directly attacking that line. So in theory, that's something the right should be like, based, we like her. But again, you'll see how they twist it and spin it and try to treat her like she's crazy. Watch.
District. And she recently made waves with this in-your-face ad. Take a look.
Billionaires tell us you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, that.
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, fuck that. So this is a, based lefty who's making a point that in theory people on the right should agree with, but if you got those tribal blinders on, it's, you're never going to acknowledge that.
Imagine I propose a housing for all bill in Congress. Then
now that's where you just lost the right-wingers. Housing for everybody? I mean, there's got to be some percentage of people who should have to fucking sleep on the street in their own piss, right? Am I right? But fucking housing for everybody. Crazy-ass idea. Housing for everybody. And what do you think? Everybody deserves a bed and some food to eat?
imagine you, me, and a million of our friends took action and occupied empty houses nationwide. They couldn't ignore us. No one has ever done anything like this. That's why it's going to work. Are you ready?
So understand what she's doing there. She's saying, well, look, we got a lot of empty houses, and they're owned by like BlackRock and big corporations. She goes on to talk about this. If we occupy those houses, you get their attention, and then maybe they can, fucking pass a bill that makes it a right to have a roof over your head, and we can build some permanent housing for homeless people. I don't think she's arguing, hey, let's occupy these houses and then refuse to leave, and that's the end of it. Because everybody knows it's not going to, if you occupy a house that is not yours, you're not permanently going to be able to stay there. I don't think anybody expects that in any way, shape, or form. It's a form of protest to spur action to actually come up with a permanent solution, a long-term solution. And again, the solution is not, it's not a partisan thing. It's really not. Because, what was the country that did it? Fuck, I'm blanking on the country. But they also did this, I think, in Utah, too. They did it in the state of Utah, where they just had a housing first policy when it came to homelessness. And you just basically had a right to a roof over your head now. You don't get a mansion, you don't get a 2,000 square foot thing with a pool in the back or whatever. No, you just got a roof over your head, whether it was an apartment, whether it was one of those mini houses or some shit. And they were able to nearly eliminate homelessness. There's a country that effectively did eliminate homelessness because they did that housing first policy. My guess is that's what she's saying. Hey, let's do this protest to wake everybody up. Occupy houses that nobody owns and that are sitting there and owned by a bank or whatever, and then maybe we'll get some long-term solution thing out of this. Maybe that's something they can't ignore, and then they'll be spurred to address it with policy. That doesn't sound crazy to me.
Parson says she's actually occupied empty buildings before, like houses going into foreclosure, and she's instructed homeless people to occupy businesses too, like the Fife Motel in 2020, where they refused to leave or pay after the first night. Some of her other plans she wants to enact if she's elected are to raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour.
Yeah, raising the minimum wage to $30 an hour. Look, I have to admit, that is too high. And that's too high because there are going to be so many businesses that simply can't afford that. And that would literally just go out of business if they had to pay $30 an hour. Now, If she's just using that as a negotiating position to then maybe get to, $15 or $20 an hour minimum wage that actually gets implemented, well, then she's being sort of based. Because it is true. In order to reach the moon, you got to shoot for the stars. So you rep a hardline position to get then the reasonable position implemented. If that's what she's doing, that's brilliant strategy. If she actually wants $30 an hour, I don't agree with that. But I will say, and I've made this argument before, because conservatives make the same objection when you say 15, right? They say, look, businesses can't afford that. They'll go out of business. You want businesses to go under. It's going to be worse for everybody. That's the argument that they make. Now, at $30 an hour, I think that argument happens to be true. At 15, it's not true. But even if it were true at 15, all you have to do is create a federal government program which subsidizes and makes up the difference. So, they have to pay $12 of the 15 and the federal government picks up the next 3 for, that's it. That's all you got to do. Have a small business subsidy program which subsidizes the wages. That's it. So it is workable. But again, I think it would be more workable at 15 or 20 than it would be at 30. But anyway, I digress.
ICE, because the current immigration system is, quote, a combination of systemic racism, the prison industrial complex, and corporate greed. She also wants to...
Private prisons are absolutely corporate greed. They're absolutely corporate greed. And by the way, ICE was created in the early 2000s. It's like 2003 or some shit. Because we've always had the Border Patrol, which does the stuff that is also delegated to ICE now. So it's an unnecessary... And then that's the thing. I thought conservatives always talked about, a big federal government with all these different agencies. Why do we have all these agencies? The alphabet agencies, as they used to call them. We got to get rid of them or reduce them. And here's an instance where it's just like they do the same stuff that Customs and Border Protection does. And they're like, no, we like that now too. Why? It's unnecessary. It's big government for the sake of big government.
Repeal federal laws that stop unlawful entry and re-entry of migrants, end cash bail, have a one-time cancellation of all student debt, and pass the Green New Deal. Let's bring in the Democratic Socialist candidate.
So his whole purpose in pointing all those things out is to be like, look, isn't she insane? Look how insane she is. And he's virtue signaling to his audience of like, so this is somebody you're supposed to hate. So now even though I'm going to act like it's a good faith conversation, just know she's the lunatic. That's how he's setting it all up. Now, look, I think there's interesting debates and discussions to have around each one of those policy points. And honestly, I agree with her on some of them, and I disagree with her on other ones. Like there was something there that sort of hinted at open borders. I don't believe in open borders. But I'd love to have that debate or that discussion with her because she's smart, as you're about to see. But he's just trying to set the table and be like, she's a psycho, now let's talk.
For Congress, Rebecca Parson. All right, Rebecca, so any house, any structure, any building, you're saying rise up and occupy it. Doesn't that seem a little dangerous?
Well, I'm not calling on anybody to...
Okay, let me just say this real quick. Isn't it dangerous to have anybody be homeless in the first place, Jesse Waters? Like, that's the thing that's so annoying about people like Jesse Waters and people on the far right, is that, like, they just grandfather in all of the cruelty and stupidity and idiocy and corruption and brokenness of our current system. And they're like, this response that you have to our broken system, isn't that kind of wacky? No, having any homeless people in the first place is kind of wacky. When Jeff Bezos is projected to be a fucking trillionaire by, like, I forget the year, maybe 10 or 20 years from now. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to me that everybody doesn't have a roof over their head, because we can certainly afford to put a roof over everybody's head. That's not... reaching the moon is a lot harder than putting roofs over people's heads. It's a policy choice to not do that. But that he's fine with. He grandfathers that in. Hey, it's just how it works. It's on you. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But you want to occupy some of these places? Isn't that dangerous? It's dangerous to have any homeless people in the first place. It's a broken society if you have the massive levels of homelessness that we currently have.
Break the law. I'm just pointing out the fact that there are 600,000 homeless people in this country, 40,000 homeless veterans, and 1 in 5 homeless people are kids. Meanwhile, we have 28 empty homes for every homeless person. So
that is a crazy fact, isn't it? 28 empty homes for every homeless person. I did not know that. I just learned something.
I'm calling on all of us to think about the empty homes that are owned by corporations like BlackRock, like Zillow, like the banks, that are owned by those companies, those large corporations, and not being used for what they're intended for, which is actually housing people.
But if a bank owns...
I love how she reframed it as like, look, corporations own these things and they're just fucking sitting there. They're just sitting there. And that was their big trick after the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. They swooped in, bought up all these homes at a low price, and then they try to rent them back to people and jack up the rent. I mean, I know that like people like Jesse, these people posture as being anti-elite, but then they will, everything they say has the framework of defending the elites and the current system that operates.
A house that's foreclosed, someone that wants the house is able to buy it, but they can't buy it if there's a homeless person in there. What happens if they move in and some guy's just sleeping on the floor?
Well, I'm calling on us to think about buildings that have been empty for a while, that are owned by corporations. You're not having a lot of buyers coming looking at them. They're just sitting empty, and there are a lot of houses like that, both in places like here in Washington State and across the country. And so I think that in the rich...
That is an interesting thing to ponder, isn't it? Like, if you have all these old houses in disrepair that are just sitting there, and nobody's going to buy them, nobody's interested in buying them. They're in these, like, dilapidated neighborhoods. I feel like Jesse Waters actually has a problem with a homeless person that might go in one of those places to sleep. Like, he might actually be like, get the fuck out of there. So wait, do you literally care more about the sanctity of the property, even though it's sitting there with nothing going on and nothing is going to go on in there? Do you care more about the house than you do about the person who's like wandering in there to sleep? Because it seems like that is what he would believe. I'd love to hear his answer to that.
Richest country on earth, we should not have anybody who's homeless living on the street, especially not 40,000 veterans, especially not 120,000 kids.
Yeah.
Based. Those are good points. Those are great points.
I agree. I don't know if that's the right way to go about the homeless issue. What about...
Yeah, but how would Jesse Waters do it? I'll tell you. Criminalization. That's his answer. So in other words, just make it so I don't see it. I don't care where they go. I just don't want to see it. I don't want to see it, and also protect property, even property that's not being used. So, like, just lock them up, basically. That's his idea. Lock them up.
ICE. You want to abolish ICE? Who's going to deport all the criminal illegal aliens?
Well, actually, decades of...
First of all, I love criminal illegal aliens. It would be Border Patrol would still do deportations. They would. Did he not think of that? Is he's trying to do a gotcha, but there's an easy answer to his gotcha. His gotcha is not at all a gotcha.
Ago, even during the Reagan era, this was before ICE, and we managed the immigration system fine. I think there's existing, pre-ICE law enforcement that can deal with immigration, but at the same time...
Wait, what do you mean?
There's...
Who is...
So stupid.
That big?
Well, for example, Customs, local police, Customs and Border Patrol. There's...
Look at Jesse's face. Like, you just got owned casually, and he's like, right.
Also,
but
the
local
legal
police
right to seek
can't handle
asylum.
immigration law. You need ICE because you got to get these people out of the country that are dangerous, right?
Okay, just side point real quick. I really hate because they're dangerous, right? There was a study done by the Cato Institute, which is actually a right-wing, like libertarian-leaning institute, and they found that immigrants commit crime, both documented immigrants and undocumented immigrants commit crime at a lower rate than, people born in the U.S. So the idea of, like, oh, they're criminals. Like, he would consider the border crossing in and of itself criminal enough to merit deportation. I'm not with that. Look, I have no problem. I don't believe in open borders. And I think if somebody is a criminal and they come in here and it's undocumented, I got no problem deporting them. None whatsoever. But it seems to me like his thing, he would just deport them all type thing. Doesn't matter. Don't care about the backstory. Don't care about the situation. Don't care about no access to a job. Don't care if you're escaping from a cartel. Don't care if you're just a good person trying to create your own life here and you family person, whatever. Gone. That's the sense I get from him.
We managed fine before ICE, and what I'm really concerned about is the fact that all across the country, including in my district, there are 28 empty homes for every homeless person. Why do we have veterans sleeping on the street who went to serve their country, and now they can't even find a place to live? And so
I love how she keeps bringing up the veteran thing, because that's using his framework against him, because they do the veteran humping all the time and veteran worship all the time. And she's like, look, we got homeless veterans. They deserve a roof over their head. And he's like, criminal, illegal, alien, something.
I'm asking people to think about this situation, this problem we have. Politicians just pay lip service to it. They say they're going to do something about it, and they don't. They act like the problem is way too complicated to solve. Meanwhile, it just gets worse and worse and worse. We actually in Tacoma had people who were encamped on the site of an encampment from the Great Depression 100 years ago. Then it was called a Hooverville. Now it's called a tent city. So if in 100 years we couldn't solve this problem and it's only gotten worse, we need to take a different way of looking at this issue. We need to look at all these empty homes, have people live in them.
I agree the politicians have paid lip service to dealing with the homeless. I just don't know if migrating into abandoned buildings is the best way. You also wanted to raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour. Do you think that might help with inflation?
I love his smug laugh. I love his smug laugh. Did he say anything about the rescue packages during COVID, where the first one, especially under Trump, basically all the money just went to corporate welfare? We just handed over a bunch of money to all these giant corporations that said they were struggling. I remember we did it to the airline. We gave so billions and billions of dollars to the airlines, and they turned around and laid people off anyway. Now, has Jesse Waters ever said, oh, well, maybe that was one of the things that led to inflation? Hey, I'm against welfare, and that's corporate welfare. I'm against that. Never. He only talks about it when it's like, any policy to help working people. He's going to come up with a cadre of excuses as to why we can't do it. In this instance, because of inflation. Higher minimum wage is going to lead to inflation. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, man. He has no clue what he's talking about. And by the way, he's one of these people who does think big government spending is always the reason for inflation. So, but hold on. A $30 an hour minimum wage, even though it's not a policy I agree with, I would support 15, that's not government spending. That's not government spending. So what are you talking about that leading to inflation? I don't understand. It just seems like he thinks there's a straight line from one thing to the other, and there's just not. There's just not. Like, you have to expand on that. Why do you think that is going to lead to inflation? Why would you think that's going to lead to inflation? Because, and we've gone over it, Matt Stoller wrote a phenomenal article talking about how 60% of inflation just went right to corporate profits. So in other words, corporations took the narrative of, oh my God, inflation. There was this inflation hysteria and mania, and then what did? They just jacked up their prices to pretend like it was inflation, but really it was just padding the bottom line. And there's a lot of details around this too, in terms of which companies did it and with which products they did it. So that's one of the things that's leading to inflation. The other thing is the supply chain crisis. That's another thing that's leading to it. Monopoly power is leading to it. He's not serious about what causes inflation, how do you fix inflation. He's just trying to score a cheap political point by somehow linking inflation to a higher minimum wage. So, I mean, by his logic, should we not have a minimum wage because, he's afraid even $7.25 an hour maybe led to inflation? I mean, he's just such a hack, man. He's just such a hack. He doesn't approach these ideas seriously in any way, shape, or form.
Well, actually, some studies have found that 60% of inflation is due to corporate price gouging. And
she's so on point. She's so on point. He tried to set her up as this psycho, and she's coming in here, and in many ways, she's running circles around him, even though I don't agree with some of her policy proposals.
And with the $30 minimum wage, I realize that's much higher than it is right now. But if you look at the MIT living wage calculator, all across the country, not just in blue states, high-cost blue states like Washington, all across the country, counties in Michigan, Arkansas, Mississippi, $30 is the minimum living wage for an adult to be able to support a child. And if we restructured the way we do incentives with the government, for example, the government has given over $4 billion in subsidies to Elon Musk, but when was the last time they gave a subsidy to a small business owner? I'm a small business owner myself, and if we had the government subsidizing small business owners
What's your business?
to pay their employees a living wage, that would go a long way.
Do you pay $30 an hour?
I do, yeah.
You do? Now, do you know if other people pay?
I love that. He thought he had a gotcha there. Do you pay your workers $30 an hour? Like, she was definitely going to say no. She's like, yeah, I do.
They might not have a business after that. But that might be what you want, because then they can go out of business and then the homeless people can move into the old building. Listen.
Absolutely not.
All right.
See, he's not. He pretends that he engages in good faith. This is not good faith at all. It's not like he's not actually interested in having a sincere back and forth and exploring different ideas and policies. He's just like a smug douche.
Rebecca, I got to go. This has been enlightening. I think we would agree to disagree. But good luck in your race. And I'm not sure if you're going to win, but if you do win, God bless you. And God bless the people in Washington. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here.
All right. Well, that was interesting. Honestly, she is left of me, but I love the fact that she's out there. Because I don't like that I'm viewed as like, fringe left voice, because I'm really not. I call myself an international centrist. I mean, shit, I'm right smack dab in the middle of mainstream American opinion, too. Like, I'm right with the polls on, like, most issues. On 90 to 95% of issues, I'm right where most Americans are if you actually look at their beliefs on the policy issues. She's to the left of me. But, like, that's what's up. Because we need people like that to drag the Overton window back to, like, where my politics are. You have to take a hard negotiating position in order to make any change at all. So, God bless. God bless. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.